In a remote, prejudice-filled town, a 28-year-old black woman, orphaned and living with her grandmother, struggles to keep a rundown shelter for abandoned, disabled children alive. One day at a gas station, she meets a well-dressed man in an expensive suit stranded on his way home to care for his sick mother, accused by the locals of trying to scam them because he can't pay by phone. Ignoring the ridicule, she quietly pays for his gas and leaves. 3 days later, the man returns with his organization, bringing a gift that will change the town forever. Before we dive in, this story lets us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The town of Plainwood sat quietly at the edge of nowhere, like a place the world had forgotten on purpose. The cracked asphalt roads stretched between lonely gas stations and boarded-up diners. Sun-bleached signs clung to rusted poles, flapping weakly in the breeze, advertising businesses that had shut down years ago. Faded curtains hung in crooked windows, and yards full of patchy grass gave up trying to look alive. It was the kind of place where people stayed because they couldn't afford to leave, or because they'd given up trying. The sky that morning was a dull gray, heavy with clouds that looked like they'd been there for weeks. Even the sun seemed hesitant to shine down on Plainwood. At the corner gas station, a small group of locals gathered by the convenience store. Their voices were low, their eyes sharp, their stares lingering. They weren't in a hurry. It wasn't that kind of town. Instead, they stood with steaming coffee cups in hand, swapping stories, complaints, and occasionally sideways glances full of quiet suspicion. They noticed her the second she came into view. Alicia, 28 years old, black. Her dark brown skin stood out like fresh paint against the weathered backdrop of Plainwood. Her frame was tall, slender, with the quiet strength of someone used to walking miles, to carrying burdens most wouldn't dare touch. Her hair, tight black curls, was pulled back into a neat bun, sharp and practical. Her outfit was simple: old jeans, worn sneakers, and a plain gray t-shirt. In her hands, a small stack of flyers, edges slightly curled. The black ink starting to fade under the weight of too many rejections. The words across the top read, "Hope Haven, shelter for abandoned and disabled children. We need your help." It wasn't the first time she walked these streets, and it wouldn't be the last, but every time the looks were the same. "Always got her nose in other people's business," one man muttered, barely bothering to lower his voice as she passed. "She should focus on taking care of her own," an older woman added, clutching her purse a little tighter. A teenage boy on a rusted bike snorted, "Don't know why she stays here. Ain't nobody wanting her. Or that old dump she's begging for." Alicia heard it all. She always did. But she kept walking, her eyes forward, her steps steady. She'd grown up in this town, or more accurately, she'd survived it. Orphaned when she was 8, shuffled between distant relatives and worn-out couches until her grandmother, sweet, stubborn Miss Edna, took her in. They lived in a small, creaky house on the edge of town with leaky pipes and peeling paint. But it was home. Miss Edna had taught her 2 things: never apologize for who you are, and always fight for those with no voice. Now that fight was Hope Haven. The old shelter sat near the woods, its faded blue paint chipping away, its walls cracked and tired. It housed children no one else wanted, the abandoned, the disabled, the forgotten. Donations were scarce, volunteers even scarcer. No one paid attention to a rundown shelter at the edge of nowhere run by a black woman in a mostly white town, but Alicia did because someone had to. The flyers were her latest desperate attempt to change that. She'd printed them with what little money she scraped together, hoping to stir even an ounce of compassion from the people who crossed the street to avoid her. As she passed the diner, more eyes followed. Whispers floated through the air like smoke. Some looked at her with distrust, others with quiet annoyance, a few with outright contempt. It wasn't new. She wasn't surprised, but it still burned. Alicia gripped the flyers tighter and kept walking, her heartbeat steady, her jaw set. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here for those kids, those tiny, forgotten lives who deserved better than this broken town. She didn't know it yet, but fate was about to send help her way from a place even more unexpected than the kindness buried deep beneath Plainwood's cold streets. The gas station looked even older up close. Faded yellow paint peeled from the wooden siding, and the sign above the small store flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. The fuel pumps were rusted, the kind with analog dials that clicked as they spun like they belonged to another era. Alicia pulled her car, an old dented sedan that had seen better days, up to the farthest pump and stepped out, the flyers tucked under her arm. The air smelled like oil, hot pavement and dust with a sharp edge of cigarette smoke drifting from the group standing by the ice machine. She didn't need to look to feel the eyes on her. She was used to that feeling by now. This wasn't downtown where people were too busy to care who you were. This was Plainwood outskirts, and out here being black, being different meant being watched. As she reached for the pump, voices cut through the low hum of the place. "What's your problem, man? You think you can just roll in here and get gas for free?" Alicia's eyes flicked toward the commotion near the first pump. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood beside a gleaming black Cadillac Escalade, its chrome grille catching the weak sunlight. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, the fabric expensive, Italian cut. A black overcoat draped over his shoulders despite the warm weather. His hands, emerging from crisp white cuffs fastened with gold cufflinks, bore several thick gold rings, including a distinctive signet ring on his right hand. His dark hair was slicked back and his face was sharp, chiseled with the hard edges of someone who'd seen too much of life. A thin gold chain glinted at his collar. Behind him, a second man in a dark suit stood by the driver's door, arms crossed, watchful. The station attendant, a short, red-faced man in his 40s, was pointing aggressively, his voice loud enough to draw attention from the others loitering nearby. "You people always think you can pull some stunt," the attendant sneered. "Bet you've got a record as long as my arm. You think 'cause you drive a fancy car you can weasel your way out of paying." Alicia paused, her hands still on the gas pump, eyes narrowing. The others standing around, the coffee drinkers, the tired-looking mechanic by the garage, the woman on her phone, watched with smug amusement. No one stepped in. Some even chuckled under their breath, whispering, waiting for the show to escalate. The well-dressed man raised his hands slowly, palms open, his movements controlled and measured. His voice was low, calm, but strained, carrying a faint trace of an accent. "Look, I'm not trying to cheat anybody. I didn't realize this place only takes cash. Yeah, I've heard it all before." The attendant cut him off, stepping closer. "You wise guys think rules don't apply to you? Well, not here." Alicia watched the man's jaw tighten, his eyes darkening with controlled frustration, but he stayed composed. She could see it in the way his shoulders squared, the quiet, practiced restraint of someone used to being misunderstood, maybe even hated on sight. The crowd shifted, some pulling out their phones, ready to film, not to help. The man tried again, slower this time, his voice dropping even lower. "My mother, she's sick. I'm heading back to see her. I spent what cash I had helping someone I ran into on the road. I figured this place would take mobile pay." "You figured wrong," the attendant snapped. "Ain't my problem. You don't have cash, you don't get gas. Simple." He reached for his phone. "Or I can call the cops and they'll be happy to explain it to you." Alicia's pulse quickened. The man wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't yelling, but that didn't matter here. His expensive suit, his gold rings, his luxury car, they'd already made him guilty in their eyes. She knew that feeling all too well. The whispers started again. Someone muttered, "Call the cops already." Another snickered, "Bet he's got drugs in that thing." Alicia clenched her jaw. Her eyes drifted across the crowd. Smirks, folded arms, self-satisfied faces. No one offering help, no one caring about the truth. Just a bunch of people too ready to play jury, judge, and executioner. She could have looked away, could have fueled her car and driven off. Let it be someone else's problem. But she knew better. She knew what it meant when good people stayed quiet. Before she could second-guess herself, Alicia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air. "I'll pay for his gas." The words fell heavy in the space between them. The attendant froze. The man in the suit turned toward her, surprise flickering across his sharp features. The crowd reacted first, a chorus of laughter, disbelief, even mockery. "You serious?" the attendant scoffed. "You don't even know this guy." "That's right," Alicia shot back, her voice steady. "I don't, but I know when someone's being treated like garbage for no good reason." The woman with the phone laughed, shaking her head. "Guess trouble attracts trouble." Alicia ignored her, Walking past the gawkers to the register, she pulled out her worn wallet, thumbing through the few bills she had. Money meant for flyers, maybe a little food for the shelter. Gone, but some things mattered more. She paid for both her gas and the man's. No hesitation, no regret. As the receipt printed, the attendant muttered, "Your money, your mistake." Alicia pocketed the receipt, her gaze unwavering. The only mistake is thinking cruelty makes you right. The crowd's amusement faded as they realized the confrontation was over. One by one, they drifted back to their cars, their coffee, their whispered judgments. The man approached her, his polished Italian leather shoes clicking softly on the cracked pavement. Up close, his eyes were steel gray, sharp, but not unkind. A faint scar ran along his jawline. He opened his mouth, words caught for a moment before he found them. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk, the accent more noticeable now. "I know," Alicia replied simply. He reached into his jacket, and for a moment the man by the Escalade tensed, but he only pulled out a business card holder, gold-plated. "At least let me repay you, Signorina. A meal, perhaps." Alicia shook her head, a small, tired smile pulling at the corner of her lips. "Don't worry about it." Before he could protest, a gust of wind picked up, carrying one of her flyers from the open car door. It tumbled across the pavement, landing near his feet. He bent down smoothly, picking it up with ring-adorned fingers, eyes scanning the words. "Hope Haven Shelter." His brow furrowed, curiosity blooming behind the hard edges of his expression. Alicia was already walking away, sliding back into her car, engines sputtering to life. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Some acts of kindness weren't meant to be repaid, but sometimes they planted seeds where you least expected. The man stood there, holding the flyer, his steel gray eyes following her car until it disappeared down the dusty road. His companion approached. "Don Salvatore, shall we go?" The man, Don Salvatore Romano, folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Yes, but first find out who she is." It had been 3 days since that morning at the gas station, but the memory was still sharp in Alicia's mind. She hadn't expected to see him again. The man with the expensive suit, the gold rings, and those steel gray eyes. Just another stranger passing through Plainwood, caught in the same web of judgment this town loved to spin. 3 days of walking the dusty streets, handing out flyers that most people ignored. 3 days of fake smiles and polite no thank yous. The shelter was still hanging by a thread, the roof still leaked when it rained, and Hope Haven was still invisible to the world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked driveway as Alicia sat on the front steps, her elbows resting on her knees, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Inside, the kids finished dinner, their laughter faint through the old walls. Miss Edna was sorting donations. A small box of canned goods from the church down the road, barely enough to last a week. Alicia closed her eyes for a second, the weight of it all pressing down like it always did. Then she heard it, the deep, smooth purr of powerful engines rolling up the road. Her eyes snapped open. A cloud of dust rose beyond the shelter's faded sign as a convoy of vehicles appeared. Black Cadillac Escalades, Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedans, BMW 7 Series, all with tinted windows that reflected the evening light like mirrors. There were a half dozen of them, maybe more, moving slow and steady up the driveway like a presidential motorcade. For a moment, Alicia didn't move. Her heart kicked hard in her chest as the vehicles came to a stop, engines purring low before cutting off one after another. The air settled into a heavy, watchful silence. And then she saw him, the man from the gas station. He stepped out of the lead Escalade, adjusting the cuffs of his white shirt beneath a perfectly tailored navy suit. His overcoat was draped over his shoulders like a cape. Dark hair slicked back, gold rings catching the fading light, steel gray eyes finding hers instantly. Alicia's mouth went dry. She hadn't expected him. She hadn't expected any of this. Miss Edna stepped onto the porch beside her, knitting forgotten in her hands. What in the world? The other men climbed out of their vehicles, all dressed in dark suits, their movements synchronized, professional. They looked dangerous, powerful even, but their eyes weren't hard. They watched quietly, curious. The man walked toward her, his Italian shoes barely making a sound on the gravel. stopping a few feet away. He pulled something from his jacket pocket and held it up. It was her flyer. "You dropped this," he said simply, his accented voice smooth. Alicia stared at the crumpled paper, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes flicked from the flyer to his face, then to the row of luxury vehicles and the men standing behind him. "I didn't think—" She trailed off, her voice unsteady. "How did you even—" He offered a faint smile, controlled, almost enigmatic. "You left in a hurry. Guess it caught the wind." His gaze drifted to the shelter behind her. "Hope Haven. You run this place?" Alicia hesitated, still trying to piece it all together. "Yeah, I do." The man nodded, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, the tension in his broad frame easing. "My name is Salvatore Romano." He gestured to the men behind him with a subtle wave of his hand. "These are my associates. Some call me Il Leone." He paused. "The Lion." Also a long story. Miss Edna let out a low hum of suspicion beside her, but Alicia raised a hand, eyes still fixed on Salvatore. "You tracked me down because of a flyer?" she asked, confusion lacing every word. Salvatore's smile turned sad for a brief second. "I tracked you down because 3 days ago, when no one else gave a damn, you did." Alicia swallowed hard, her pulse still racing. Salvatore continued, voice low but steady, each word measured. "That morning I was on my way back home. My mother, she's been sick a long time. Hospital bills, treatments, the whole nightmare." He paused, something flickering behind his eyes. "I took the back roads, stayed off the main highway. Didn't want attention, didn't want questions. Figured Plainwood would be quiet." His jaw clenched for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough around the edges. "Ran out of gas. Stupid mistake. Gave my last cash to someone in need a few towns back. Figured people would be decent at the gas station." His eyes met hers. "I figured wrong." Alicia's stomach tightened, the memory of that scene at the station playing fresh in her head. The shouting, the cruel looks, the threat of police. Salvatore tilted his head slightly. "But you didn't turn your back. You paid for a stranger. You didn't even want thanks." He held up the flyer again. "But you did want help." Alicia looked at the worn edges of the flyer, the bold black letters, the shelter's name. Her fingers itched to take it from him, but she stayed still. Salvatore glanced at the shelter, then back at her. "I figured maybe it's time someone actually showed up." Behind him, his men opened the trunks of the vehicles. Boxes of food, medical supplies, toys, blankets, all neatly packed, stacked high. Alicia's throat tightened. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't know what to say. Salvatore adjusted one of his rings, suddenly looking almost uncomfortable. "I get it. We look dangerous. People cross the street when they see us. But the way I see it, broken people help broken places." Alicia studied him. His tired eyes, the scar on his jaw, the quiet, stubborn weight in his voice. Miss Edna finally spoke up, voice sharp but curious. "And you all, you're just here to help." "Out of the blue?" Salvatore shrugged, the overcoat shifting on his shoulders. "Call it karma. Call it payback. Call it whatever makes it sit right with you." He locked eyes with Alicia again. "But in my family, we don't forget when someone saves us." The wind stirred the flyer in his hand, the edges fluttering gently between them. Alicia reached out, fingers brushing the paper, her voice finally steady. "Guess Hope Haven's about to get a little louder." Salvatore's lips curved into a quiet, knowing smile. "Guess so." And for the first time in days, Alicia wasn't carrying the weight alone. The low, steady hum of powerful engines echoed down the empty streets of Plainwood long before the people saw them. It started as a distant purr on the horizon, a subtle rumble that rolled over the cracked sidewalks and faded storefronts like a warning or a promise, depending on who you asked. Old men at the diner looked up from their coffee, squinting toward the main road. A woman at the corner store paused mid-sentence on her phone, the familiar unease creeping across her face. Children peeked out from behind screen doors, eyes wide. And then they came. Luxury vehicles, dozens of them. Black Escalades with chrome accents caught the late morning sun. Mercedes sedans with tinted windows reflected the world back at itself. Behind the convoy, 2 large SUVs rumbled along, cargo areas filled with crates and supplies. The men inside wore dark suits, crisp white shirts, Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's rent. The townspeople froze. Conversations died mid-word. Coffee cups hovered in the air. Judgment sharpened like knives behind narrowed eyes. "They're back," someone muttered under their breath. "Trouble," another whispered. "Somebody better call the sheriff." But no one moved because curiosity is stronger than fear, and Plainwood thrived on watching things unravel. The convoy didn't stop at the gas station. It didn't circle back to the bars or the rundown motel. It kept going straight down the main road, past the diner, past the whispering crowds, past the weary stares, headed for the forgotten edge of town, headed for Hope Haven. Alicia stood at the front gate of the shelter, her arms crossed over her chest as the line of vehicles pulled into the cracked gravel lot. Dust curled around the tires as engines cut off one by one. It felt different this time, less like a warning, more like a statement. Salvatore Romano stepped out of the lead vehicle, straightening his tie, steel gray eyes steady as they met hers. "Hope we're not late?" he said with that quiet, controlled smile. Alicia's lips twitched despite herself. "Looks like you brought half the city with you." The men moved in sync, unloading crates from the vehicles. Food, clothes, blankets, medicine, things the shelter had desperately needed for months but could never afford. The kids peeked through the windows, their eyes wide with wonder. Miss Edna hovered on the porch, cane in hand, sharp eyes tracking every movement like a hawk. And then the townspeople came. Not close, not bold, but they came. First, it was the old men from the diner, walking slow down the sidewalk, their brows furrowed, suspicion painted across their faces. Then, the woman from the corner store, arms folded tight across her chest, lips pursed. A few teenagers on bikes hovered near the edge of the lot, watching, whispering. Alicia felt their eyes, not just on the well-dressed men, but on her. The same eyes that had followed her every step through town, heavy with doubt, coated in quiet judgment. But now those eyes weren't filled with contempt. They were filled with confusion, curiosity, because what they saw didn't fit their stories. They saw the men in expensive suits unloading food, handing out toys, fixing the broken porch railing. They saw Salvatore talking to Miss Edna with quiet respect, saw him smile gently at the children, kneel down to speak eye level with a shy little boy in a wheelchair. They saw Alicia standing at the center of it all. Not the troublemaker, not the outcast, not the naive girl wasting her time, but the woman who had somehow done what no one else dared. United them, changed the story. Salvatore walked back over, adjusting his cufflinks. "They watching?" he asked, nodding subtly toward the growing crowd by the sidewalk. Alicia's lips curled. "Like we're a circus?" Salvatore chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Good. Let them stare. Maybe they'll learn something." She glanced at the faces, the doubt beginning to crack, the curiosity simmering under the surface. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. Ms. Edna leaned over, her voice low but warm. "Well, sweetheart, you sure know how to stir up a town." Alicia let out a quiet breath, the weight on her chest lifting just a little. For once, the judgment wasn't the loudest thing in Plainwood. For once, the town didn't look away. And for the first time, she wasn't standing alone. The late summer air carried the faint hum of cicadas as the sun dipped low behind the tree line, casting a soft orange glow across Plainwood. The cracked roads still wound their way through the forgotten edges of town, but they looked different now. Not new, not fixed, but different. People walked slower past the old gas station these days. They nodded at strangers. They hesitated before judging. And at the edge of town, where the woods pressed up against the broken fences where most folks used to pretend nothing existed at all, Hope Haven stood taller than it had in years. The faded blue paint was gone, replaced by a fresh coat that caught the evening light like a promise. The porch railing was sturdy, the roof no longer sagged with rot, and the crooked old sign out front shone with bold new letters. Hope Haven, a place for every child. Alicia stood by the front steps, arms folded loosely across her chest, watching as the last few volunteers packed up from the day's work. Her jeans were streaked with paint. Her t-shirt clung to her skin with sweat and dust. But she didn't care because for the first time since she could remember, it wasn't just her and Miss Edna holding this place together with stubbornness and scraped knuckles. It was all of them. The townspeople, the volunteers from neighboring cities, Salvatore's men. Salvatore stood near the renovated porch, speaking quietly with one of his associates. His navy suit jacket was draped over a chair, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the edges of a discreet tattoo on his forearm. His steel gray eyes surveyed the scene quietly, the edges of his mouth pulled into a faint, satisfied smile. "You ever slow down?" he asked, nodding toward the stack of donation boxes by the door. Alicia shrugged, a small smirk playing at her lips. "You ever stop working?" Salvatore chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. His gold watch glinted as he adjusted it. It had been months since that first day he showed up with his convoy and truckloads of supplies. Months of work, of dedication, of slowly chipping away at walls, both physical and the ones built from years of judgment. The town had watched, wary at first, whispered, doubted, crossed the street. But time, it turns out, has a way of unraveling even the tightest knots of fear. They saw Salvatore overseeing the roof repairs, his men working side by side with local contractors. They saw his associates fixing broken playground equipment for the kids, rebuilding the old fence, organizing food drives in the shelter's pantry. They saw Alicia, always there, always steady. The girl they once dismissed, standing shoulder to shoulder with the very people they'd whispered about for years. Tonight was different, though. Tonight they weren't just working. Tonight, the town came to say thank you. Across the driveway, folding chairs lined the grass as neighbors, shopkeepers, teachers, and families gathered. It wasn't a parade. It wasn't flashy. But for Plainwood, it was something close to a miracle. A small stage stood at the center, decorated with hand-painted signs and strings of old Christmas lights. It wasn't much, but it sparkled in the growing dusk. Miss Edna appeared beside Alicia, her cane tapping gently on the porch, a rare smile softening the sharp lines of her face. "They're waiting on you, girl," she said, nodding toward the crowd. Alicia's throat tightened. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't expected it. But as the sun sank lower and the porch lights flickered on, she realized maybe it wasn't about what she expected. She walked toward the stage, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The crowd parted for her, the same people who used to cross the street when they saw her coming. Now they stepped aside, not in fear but in respect. The mayor, a gray-haired man who once avoided eye contact with her, stood by the microphone, his voice warm but uncertain as he spoke. "Tonight we want to recognize someone who reminds us that this town's got more heart than we sometimes show." He cleared his throat. "Someone who fights for the forgotten, stands up when it's hard, and proves that where you come from, what you look like, doesn't decide the size of your heart." Alicia swallowed hard as the applause rose, hesitant at first, then growing, filling the space with quiet thunder. Salvatore stood at the back of the crowd, arms crossed, watching her with a small, proud smile. The mayor handed her a small plaque, wooden, plain, but etched with careful words. "Alicia Bennett for courage, compassion, and the heart of Hope Haven." She took it with trembling hands, the weight of it pressing against every scar the town had carved into her over the years. But tonight they weren't scars, they were proof. She looked at the crowd, at the children smiling by the steps, at Miss Edna, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. Her gaze drifted to Salvatore, to the men in suits standing respectfully at the edge of the gathering, their presence a quiet shield around her. Alicia raised the plaque slightly, her voice clear and steady. "This isn't about me," she said, her eyes shining. "It's about them." She gestured toward the kids, toward the shelter. "And it's about choosing to see past the labels, the skin, the suits, the fear." She let the words settle, the quiet hum of understanding weaving through the crowd. "Hope isn't a building," she added softly. "It's what happens when people who aren't supposed to care show up anyway." The applause returned louder this time, raw with something Plainwood had long forgotten how to give: acceptance, respect. Salvatore's eyes met hers across the crowd, and for once Alicia let herself believe what she never thought possible. This place, the broken streets, the weary eyes, the tired whispers. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But tonight, under the flickering porch lights and the quiet presence of luxury vehicles parked in the distance, Plainwood felt a little less cold, and Hope Haven wasn't invisible anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. And for the first time in her life, Alicia Bennett wasn't just tolerated. She was seen. She was home. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.